Okay, good morning everyone and welcome back to the class. Just a quick, I hope you can see my screen. Is my screen visible? Can you just say yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. What we've done till now, we started with distribution management after finishing sales management, and we just had a quick recap of why we need distribution management, what are the discrepancies it takes care of, what are the channel flows it results into, and finally, how does it help the customer. We further understood it with an example where we compared soap with a car. And we saw that while the basics remain the same, the fundamental remains the same, that is the discrepancies have to be taken care of, the channel flows have to be taken care of, the implementation is entirely different. And therefore, while for a soap, the number of channel members you need is huge, for a car, the number of channel members you need is comparatively less. We saw how spatial discrepancy, temporal discrepancy differ in car and soap and so on. And therefore, we saw that while the questions are same, the answers are very different and depend on the product. We now go one step further and we talk about logistics management, which helps in the distribution management. So what is logistics management? It is the actual transportation of goods and services from the place of manufacture to the place of consumption. It's logistics management that ensures that the consumer gets the right product at the right place, at the right time, in the right quantity. And therefore, when we are talking about logistics management, the Council of Logistics Management defines it as the process of planning, implementing and controlling the efficient, cost-effective flow and storage of raw material, in-process inventory, finished goods, and related information from the point of origin to the point of consumption in order to meet the needs of the customer. So the entire journey right from the time we are only talking about distribution management, and therefore we will not really be talking about raw materials because it's in supply chain management, which is right from the point of sourcing the raw material till the delivery of the finished good to the customers. Distribution management starts from the manufacturer till the customer. So we are not really looking at raw materials, we are only looking at in-process inventory, finished goods, and related information. So this entire thing is defined as logistics management. And when we are talking about logistics management, we are talking about three areas: warehouse, inventory, and transportation. Today, we will discuss warehouse. But before we discuss the warehouse, we need to understand that why do we need logistics management? Yes, I mean, it is to ensuring that the end product reaches the consumer at the right time, at the right place, and right price, and so on. But what are we achieving? So three things: cost reduction, capital reduction, and service improvement. And this always sorts of throws a lot of questions, because when I'm talking about cost reduction, then I'm talking about, so let's just go back to the previous slide. We said we'll be talking about three things: warehouse, inventory, and transportation. Great. So cost reduction means that I should reduce the cost when I'm talking about inventory, right? I should reduce the cost when I'm talking about transportation. I should reduce the cost when I'm talking about warehouse. Capital reduction. What does capital reduction mean? Capital reduction means that please do not buy a warehouse, right? That's how I will reduce the cost for the capital reduction. But then I have a problem, because service improvement by definition means that my customer should not go back empty-handed. If a customer has come for certain product, brand, or service, then we should be able to provide the customer with that product, brand, or service, because that's what logistics management is about: providing at the right time, right place, right price. But if I decrease the cost in inventory. Then when the customer will come, that inventory may not be there, and though the cost may have reduced, the service improvement would also go down. If I do not buy a warehouse, then where will I store the goods? And if the goods are not, or if I do not have my own transportation or whatever, wherever the capital is required, then we may not have the product in the quantity that the customer wants at the time the customer wants. Then what happens to my service improvement? So are they in conflict with each other? How does it work? Go back to the basics of marketing, and marketing has nothing to do with the word I. Marketing has to do everything with the word we. And same is true over here. These three don't work in isolation. These three work together. So we are not talking about minimum cost, minimum capital, maximum service. No, we are talking about optimum cost reduction, optimum capital reduction, and optimum service improvement. Because there's nothing called minimum and maximum. You have to find what is best for your company. And therefore, yes, you may have to reduce cost, but till what? To the extent that the service improvement is not affected. And these three, when they work together, when we know at the back of our mind that the three have to work together, and only then we'll be able to meet the needs of the customer, that's when we attain the objectives of the logistics management. Okay. When I'm talking about warehouse, so I said today we'll discuss about warehouse. The warehouse can be a little small locker. Warehouse can be that huge warehouse. Warehouse can be something which is temperature controlled. Warehouse can be an open area. And therefore, the places where food, vegetables, milk is stored is also a warehouse, but it is a temperature-controlled warehouse. On the other hand, those huge warehouses where minerals and metals are stored, that's also a warehouse. So or a warehouse can be as small as this thing where bullion worth lakhs is stored. The warehouse is something, in very short, a place where we store the product or the brand. Now, warehouse market in India was valued at 1050 billion in 2020, and it is expected to grow at a compounded annual growth rate of 14.86%. That's huge. And as I said last time, efficiency is the buzzword in the warehouse. It is technology which has become so important when we are talking about distribution management and supply chain management. Today, you and I can order things sitting at home and can get things sitting at home. It's thanks to the advancements of technology, which somewhere has become the backbone of distribution management and supply chain management. I showed you some figures last time, be it our elections, be it Shakti Ammas, be it our postal services, be it be it Amazon's distribution management. We are talking about huge numbers. And when we are talking about huge numbers, we are using technology a lot. In fact, we are completely dependent on technology. And that is why I keep saying that when we are talking about distribution management in India, we are using some of the best advancements in technology. Okay, why do we need a warehouse? Obviously, we need a warehouse. So this is a warehouse. It can be as big as that. We need a warehouse to store inventory, very obvious. We need a warehouse to bring together the supplies. Now, what do I mean by this? So maybe let me show this. So let's assume this is a warehouse. This is manufacturer number 1, 2, 3, 4, or plant 1, 2, 3, 4. Plant 1 makes product A and B. Plant 2 makes product B and C. Plant 3 makes product D and E, and plant 4 makes F and G. Thank God a warehouse is here because all the products come here. Once they come here, then they are dispatched according to the customer requirement, and therefore product ABC go here, BCFG go here, and so on and so forth. Now just imagine if the warehouse was not there. Each of these plants would be sending the products to different customers, and that would make such a hodgepodge of the whole thing. Not only that, the amount of cost that we would incur would be huge. And therefore, the warehouse helps in bringing the supplies together. It helps in assortment and allocation, and obviously this results in economies of scale. If the warehouse was not there, then all the customers would be in touch with all of them. All of them would be transporting to the different customers, and that would result so much increase in the cost plus so much confusion. This warehouse allows things to come here, they sort it out here, and then dispatch it to the customer. When I'm talking about a warehouse, there's some very important decisions which a company has to take. Number one, should we own a warehouse or should we take it on rent? How many warehouses should we have? What should be the size? Where should be the location, which is so important? And finally, how should be the interior layout of the warehouse? When I'm talking about ownership, are we going to do this in detail? Not really, we'll just touch into it. When I'm talking about ownership, as I said, it can be private or it can be on, so you own it or you take it on rent. Now, how do we really take that decision? For that, understand the basics. It's something like this. So you are coming to Pune and you decide as a student whether we should take a house on rent or whether we should own it. If you're here for only for a limited time, it doesn't really make sense to buy a house unless and until you are blessed with Mount Everest type of money. You rent a house. On the other hand, if you're planning to stay here for a longer period of time and maybe make it your base or something, maybe it makes sense to take a loan and buy a house. It is on similar parameters that we take a decision for the warehouse also, that whether we should buy it or whether we should take it on rent. So when I say public, you take it on rent. If you have high volumes of the product, maybe it makes sense to buy your own warehouse. If you have a demand which is there 24/7, 12 months a year, maybe it makes sense to buy a warehouse. This is assuming that your financial condition allows you. That is one thing that I'm taking for granted. However, if you have a product, brand, or service which has a fluctuating demand, which means that most probably there's a high demand in October, November, December, January, but after that there is no demand, it doesn't really make sense to buy your own warehouse because it would be empty. If your product is such which requires high security, maybe it makes sense to buy your own warehouse. If the security is low, maybe you can rent a warehouse. Because when the security is high, it makes sense to buy your own warehouse because then you can take care of the things and you can ensure that everything is safe. Please understand that when you buy a warehouse, then irrespective of whether you have the product over there or not, there is a fixed cost which you incur, which you have to give. On the other hand, when you take a warehouse on rent, you only pay when you are storing something over there. So if you look at this, when you are buying a warehouse, look at this, there's still a cost. There is no volume, but there is still a cost because there's a fixed cost which is associated. Irrespective of whether you have anything there or not, you have to incur this cost, which may be your security cost, which may be your electricity cost, which there is a certain cost. So at this point, it doesn't really make sense to have your own warehouse. There comes a point, on the other hand, when you take a warehouse on rent, as the volume increases, accordingly you pay. When there was no volume, you were not paying. But there comes a point where after this point, it makes sense to have your own private warehouse. You may most probably like to look at it the same way that I gave you a question a few days ago, where I asked that should you have your own salespeople or should you have agents? And I had shared some figures at what cost you should do that. So similarly, this is the cost. Obviously, we do this with equations, but every equation can be translated into a graph, and that's the beauty of the equations. That's how they help us understand things. This is the point. This is the volume at which it makes sense to have your own warehouse rather than a public warehouse, because the cost you would incur in a public warehouse would be far more than what you would incur in a private warehouse. On the other hand, if your volume is below this, it makes sense to have a public warehouse because the cost you will incur in your own warehouse would be far more than what you would incur in a public warehouse. So these are some of the parameters, as I said, on which you take decision. I haven't listed all the parameters. I have just listed 3 parameters. There may be 10 more, but you put everything to, these are the various variables. You put them together in an equation, and then you see that what is the point at which you should decide to go for your own warehouse. 3 main functions of a warehouse are movement, storage, and information transfer. And what do I mean by this? What movement, what storage, and what information transfer? So maybe let me show you how things work in a warehouse by a diagram. So when the truck comes to a warehouse, then at that point of time, right at the entrance, you unload the vehicle, you inspect for damage, you compare the purchase order and everything. What is happening? The moment you are doing this, all this information is going back to the manufacturer. The information transfer has started happening. So have the goods come in a damaged position, or are the goods okay? Is the quantity as we had ordered, or is the quantity less? The information has started. The goods have landed at the warehouse. Now, once you have inspected the goods, you have to now put them, you have to store them. And that's when movement and storage comes into picture, which is so important. Now, what is the shortest distance between 2 points? Line. And you want the goods to move the shortest distance because movement costs money, movement costs time and effort, and we want to minimize because go back, we have to reduce the cost. Cost reduction is one of the objectives of the logistics management. Now, how do I do that? There comes the storage. Which goods are the fast moving goods? What does it mean? That maybe there are some goods which are required to be shipped from the warehouse every second day. Where should we store those fast moving goods? Near the entrance, so that their movement is the minimum. On the other hand, those goods which are not the fast moving goods, please do not store them near the entrance because they would be occupying space. And again, what is space? Space is money. You are increasing the cost while our objective is to reduce the cost. So store the goods according to their popularity, according to their size. Also use the right equipment, right? So while information transfer is happening, the movement and storage is so important in ensuring that the cost is reduced. And all this can only happen if we know what our customer wants. So if the customer wants the goods to be shipped in the next 2 days, then make them ensure that the movement is minimum. Finally, then there is order picking and shipping preparation. Again, information transfer. And the goods are shipped The moment they leave the warehouse, again, what is happening? Information is being transferred, but the goods have been dispatched, and they are being dispatched for the customer. It is only when these functions happen properly that you and I get goods at the right time, at the right place, at the right price. This information transfer allows you and me to see that whether the good is available or not available. The correct movement and storage allows you and me to give a right price. If this was not taken care of by the company, then you and I would be paying a high price for that good. Together, they ensure that we on a real-time basis know where the goods are, whether we can buy them or not buy them, and whether the price is right or not. And as I said, so it's important to remember that the movement has to be the minimum. And minimum movement only happens when you remember your 5th class maths that the shortest distance between 2 points is a line, right? Equipment, are we using the right equipment to move the goods? So, because that's how, again, we will save money. Time, do we know which goods have to be shipped and when they have to be shipped? If we know, then we can make the preparation in advance. Correct utilization of space. Which goods are you storing where? Are you storing those goods which are required, whose frequency of movement is very high? Are you storing them at the back? And finally, as I keep saying, the advancements in technology, are you using the right software or the ERP to ensure that information is shared with all the stakeholders on a real-time basis? And therefore, the manufacturer should know where the goods are, how much have been sold, how many are pending, and similarly, your channel members should know what is happening in the entire cycle or chain of supply of goods. It's only when we take care of these 4 or 5 things together and understand that everything has to work together and not in isolation, that we are able to meet the needs of the customer profitably. While this is only about the warehouse, obviously the next topic would be about the inventory which is in the warehouse. At this point of time, let me stop the recording and let me open the house for